Hi, I'm Michael from Madeit4Me, and I'm going to show you how to make a Fire Force jacket from Fire Force.
First, we're going to need a lot of patterns, and I mean a lot. Done making your patterns, then it's time to test it out on some muslin. It's a good way to test out and see how the fabric flows and fits to the body. After you're done with your muslin mock-up, then it's time to cut it out on your fashion fabric. I use some stretchable denim, and it seems to be a really good fit for this project. For the blue lines, I decided to use some foam padding since it needed to keep its shape. Before you remove your paper pattern, I recommend you cut out some notches on the edges so you know exactly where to put your interfacing and also where to line up your seams. After I took off the paper pattern, I carefully removed the two pieces so I know exactly which one was the right side and the wrong side. Afterwards, I took the foam interfacing and also ran it through the iron. Now you have a nice clean edge for your stripes. After it's all ironed in place, then you're ready to sew. First I started with the sleeves. I cut out some squares so that I could put in some invisible zippers so I could insert the lights easily whenever I want to. After I sewed the squares on, then it was time to sew on the invisible zippers, and it should look something like this. After you're done with the zippers, then it's time to sew on the stripes. I recommend you pin as much as you can on the stripes so that it stays straight for the whole sleeve. After you've pinned the stripes onto the sleeve, then it's time to pin where you want the hem. After you've sewn the hem, then it's time to sew the rest of the stripes. For the center of the stripes, I decided to put on some double-sided adhesive. I first ironed on the first side, and then I ironed on the second part of the stripe. After you're done ironing on the stripes down, then it's time to sew the reflective tape. For the patches, I bought mine from Etsy at Rage Crafts, and I just ironed it and then sewed it together on the sleeve. After I ironed on the patch, then it was time to sew the sleeve together. Your sleeve should look something like this. Now it was time for the storm flap. First I sewn it inside out and then made sure that the buckles were inside too. To help make sure that the storm flap was flat while I ironed, I inserted a piece of cardstock into the whole storm flap. After a quick press through the iron, I decided to sew the storm flap shut. After that, your storm flap is ready to go. Now it was time to make the body of the jacket. Same with the sleeves, you had to cut a square out of the sides of the jacket so that you could insert the invisible zippers. After everything is sewn on, then it's time to do a quick test and see how it fits. Afterwards, it's time to sew the seams together. Next, it was time to sew the zipper on. I decided to use a dual-ended zipper so that I had maximum leg movement in my cosplay. After you sew the zipper on, then it's time to sew the storm flap to the front. Be sure to sew accurately on the storm flap's existing seam. Then you should have something like this. Next, it's time to sew the stripes together. Sewing the stripes is a little bit difficult than the seam. You have to sew onto the storm flap without sewing onto the zipper. So you have to sew onto the storm flap first and then stop right when it gets to the seam. If you get past the seam, then you have to flip the zipper past the needles so you can sew onto the rest of the jacket. Then you should have something like this. I recommend pinning the hem of this jacket first before sewing so that you have a nice clean edge. After you're done with the hem, then it's time to sew the rest of the stripes onto the jacket. I recommend using a ruler so you have a consistent length between the two lines. For the reflective tape, I decided to use some real tape so that it stays in place while I sew. It was actually a good tip I found from a friend, so thank you. Last but not least, then it's time to sew the collar together. First sew it inside out, while leaving the bottom edge open. Then iron the edge so that it has a clean look. Then sew a 1/4 inch line on the ends. And also add an interlock ending so that it's clean for when you sew it to the rest of the coat. Afterwards, just sew the sleeves onto the jacket, and now you have your finished Fire Force jacket. I love how the jacket turned out, and I'm really excited to continue working on this project. If you have any questions, feel free to comment, and don't forget to like and share below. Bye!